Well, good morning again, everybody. The Daybreak Show rolls on. Jeff Slakey, Spencer Hughes via Zoom video conference to talk about the economic development of Mason County. The Executive Director, Jennifer Baria. Jennifer, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing all right. How are you guys?
I can see that in the background. That is a nice background and tells me that you are in the office today. And
We are. We have off and on been in the office through the whole thing. It helps that, I never say that it helps to have less employees, but it helps that it's just Karin and I, and her office is probably 50 feet away from mine. So when we need to be here and we need to have more hands-on, we're able to come in. Or when we have important radio shows to do.
Yeah, right. Sure. I know that you are in the PUD billing office too, and they've had that kiosk right out front there. The main walk-up has been closed for a while now, but that kiosk, every time I come by into the studio and I drive by there, it looks like people are utilizing that. It seems like a good resource.
They are. Dropping off payments in their payment box and really getting familiar with that kiosk. It was excellent that they put it in, although people still sometimes mess up a little bit and put things in the different slots where you're not supposed to put them. So it does get a little bit jammed sometimes.
Definitely check it out. Read the instructions on the screen before you proceed.
Right.
All right, let's head over to choosemason.com. It's the Mason County's EDC website. On there, of course, like many websites, have resources to COVID-19. So I thought today'd be a good idea just to go through some of the things that you have available for not only business resources and worker resources. Business resources, and I talked to Jim Morrell from Peninsula Credit Union this week. We talked about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. Some of the other things that is on here are the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Is this kind of how is this intertwined with what's going on with COVID?
So they were opened for COVID. It allows you to essentially get a loan, an easier process for you to be able to get a loan to help you through the different funding issues that you might come across. The two big ones that came from the federal government with funding for them were the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. We call them the EIDL loans. They were the first one to really get started because they had an amount of that loan application that could be forgivable depending on the number of employees that you had. So you were able to go in and fill out the application, and if you were interested in only taking that advance, you could do that and not go after the loan. So it's essentially both through the Small Business Administration at the federal level. That one is specific to, it's essentially a small business loan, but you're able to get through it a little bit faster and to be able to talk different funding amounts because it is emergency based. So they were able to, that one already kind of sat there. It got additional funding and pushed out. So we've had businesses that have gone after that. There is still funding in both of the programs. So it's important for those businesses to know that. If you haven't heard back, just to give you a little bit of comparison, I don't have the EIDL numbers in front of me, but the Paycheck Protection Program in Washington alone, over the last, what's it been, month and a half, almost 2 months, they have processed 50,288 loans, which is close to $5 billion for that Paycheck Protection Program.
Wow.
So it is a huge number. And in our surrounding, in our surrounding states, we are the highest one that they've loaned to. Oregon's at $3 billion. Idaho's at 719 million. Alaska's at 338. That's the same region. So those are the numbers that I have. That does have a lot to do with where the employees are based. So we do have quite a bit more population and employed people here than, say, Alaska. So that difference makes a little bit more sense. But just looking at the sheer numbers that they've had to go through, systems crashings, they've had to readjust, do different applications for different programs as the CARES Act came forward. A lot of other requirements were listed in there that they then had to incorporate into a system that was not ready to handle quite that capacity, but they keep improving it and moving it forward.
It's been about, like you said, month and a half or 2 months or so since all this kind of shook out and started. And as we start to hear words of maybe even more and more acts coming out of Congress
Mhm.
federally, has it been easier, you think, for businesses and individuals to navigate through this with the different types of bills? I mean, if there's CARES Act, and then there's this part of it, and then there's the next one. Does that make it easier to get through the system, or does bill upon bill upon bill just kind of complicate the issue, you think?
I think that if I'm honest, and I hope I'm wrong, the majority of the public hasn't read the CARES Act bill.
Right.
You've got a lot of people relying on those different organizations like SBA or the different unemployment or employment security department, really kind of putting their mindset on what would be the best for the business, what would be the best for the employee, and let's drill down all of that wording. The CARES 2.0 Act that's coming up for discussion on Friday, it's 1,800 pages.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people who are going to sit there and go through that. There are people that do, and there are people that will, but I think what helps those businesses, especially as you get smaller and smaller in employee numbers and you don't have the different departments that could maybe handle the load of looking into this section is for us, this section is for us. They rely a lot on the deliverability of that product. So SBA being able to drill down to, here is the additional funding, here is your criteria. Make sure that you have all of that documentation together and you can move faster through the system. I don't know that knowing the details of the CARES Act are going to help you weed through it any faster. It does help you stay informed on what's out there so that you can be your own advocate for the different projects and fundings that are coming forward. So but there's even, you get even more intricate. There's funding that's going to be coming that was set aside in the first it's technically the fourth CARES Act that is for governments that hadn't been released yet. So now the governments, the local governments like your cities and your counties are able to start talking about how to use those funds and how to pull those funds down. So talking with your different legislators at the state level, at the local level, to help them inform on what it is that's needed locally, that's probably the local community's best bet.
Under the worker resources tab there on that same COVID-19 page, there is some more information from Employment Security Department, unemployment insurance. I talked, as I mentioned, with Jim Morrell from Peninsula Credit Union, and he was telling me about the rise of increase of unemployment. It's fraud, basically, where somebody will use like my name, for example, and apply for unemployment insurance. And I think they had some reports and cases where employees of theirs, he'd get the phone call, hey,
Mhm.
is so and so employed there? They fill out a claim, and he looks down the hall and he says, no, they're still here, they're still working
Right.
for us. What this is
What's going
a
on?
terrible turn of events.
It is a horrible turn of events, and it's one of those things that just irritates me because all of the work that's going into making sure that the people that are actually unemployed gets the funding that they need to then have their identity stolen, their ability to, even in the future, access those dollars, or the business. Maybe that's something that doesn't correlate with people, but when the business pays out in a normal circumstance, not COVID related, but in a normal circumstance, when the business pays out those unemployment dollars, there's an increase on what it is that they have to pay back to kind of balance out the system. So you have somebody who is terminated, who is let go, who's accessing those dollars, that business is then kind of increased payment to help rebuild what it is that they have available. When you have these fraud, these people going after money, you are impacting your businesses, and not just your individuals, not to mention all of the work that they have to do now that somebody has their social security number. Somebody can not just even go after unemployment, they can open credit cards. They can, at this time is just so precarious anyway, that to add that additional worry into it, I think is just, it's really disheartening.
It's real. Yeah, it's terrible when I heard that news. And so there is links on that site on your page, choosemason.com, under COVID-19 resources for worker resources. On that information for workers, also links to the IRS, of course. We still have to remember that eventually eventually it'll be tax time again, whether or not it's going to be the end of July or whatever they said, or even extended further there. So it's just a tough time for everybody. It looks though that businesses, workers, the general population seems to be gathering around, supporting each other in as best as ways as possible. I mean, that's kind of how we've built things.
Right. And I think as we move forward through the governor's reopening plan, those different phases and the different levels that businesses are going to be able to open, what businesses are going to be able to open in phase 2, in phase 3, and in phase 4, really looking at what we can still do to minimize those impacts. You know, social media is a great tool, but it's also kind of frustrating because you do start to see the different areas where people aren't maintaining those safety boundaries. So really, as a business, not just looking at their reopening plans as, you know, a suggestion, making sure that their employees know how they need to act every day, especially if you're dealing with the public, so that the public knows that when they come to your store, when they come to visit your business, they are in a clean environment, they're in a safe place, they know that they're being protected, as well as the employees. So really looking, especially as we move into the beautiful weather, that 80-degree weekend was blissful. I loved it, but really looking at what we're doing, and just making sure that we're doing what we can to not have another shutdown further in the future, because we're not going to be able to respond well to that.
I was listening to the news yesterday. We were talking about Major League Baseball and the NFL, and the head coach is super important, and the offensive and defensive coordinators for football teams are important. But I guess the newest, most important job is the infectious control expert, or something that every NFL team will have to have. And they're going to have to, check and make sure, okay, so if the team's out practicing, did they use towels? Okay, now who used what towels? Do all those towels go over here? And did you guys, now you're in the shower. Okay, so who's here? And everybody, I mean, there's a whole lot of, and for the most part, an infectious control expert is not necessary, I don't think, in normal business. But when you're looking at gyms or other close contact situations,
and making sure that those systems are in place. They opened up golf clubs, or not golf clubs, golf courses. The clubs are what you play with.
Right.
Clearly, I'm a golfer. But you go to a place, if you've got your own clubs, that's great. If it's a walkable course, even better. But if it's not, you are riding in a cart. You need to be able to know that cart has been cleaned between uses, or just what their sanitation process is. Do I need the gritty details? No, but I need to know that when I'm at a place that's what I'm expecting, and can comfortably assume that that's what's happened.
There's a lot of good resources on the website. Again, choosemason.com. EDC Director Jennifer's on the line with me now via Zoom video conference. Good to see you. I'm glad to know that you and everybody's healthy and safe, and we're getting through this together. And more information, just let me know and we'll get you on, okay?
Will do. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, good to see you.